Welcome back, everybody. Today's episode of Navigating is going to be a discussion between Camille and I. She is my co-teacher, and she's the community manager at Holistic Life Navigation. And we've taught literally thousands of people at this point around expected and actual and remembered threat. So I thought I would do a little kind of opening lecture, and then Camille and I will riff back and forth just to bring a sense of understanding of what this means and how to apply it into your life and how it can be so life-changing. I think the first thing to say is when someone has anxiety or PTSD or grief or fear, it's not someone that's living necessarily in a present experience, but someone that's feeling the felt sense of historical experiences and expecting something similar in the future. And in that expectation and remembrance, there's a somatic experience. So it's not just like my mind is remembering my grandmother dying, but my body is feeling the event and it feels like it's actually happening right now. So these past and future images, remembrances, expectations, they trick the body sensationally out of present experience. And I think why I want to go into some nuance with you around this, Camille, is to really help better define or better draw the line or make sense of how people say, but the threat is now. There are threats in the world. They are happening now. Let's kind of start with that part.
Yeah. Yeah. And you get that question a lot, how can I be safe in an unsafe world or in a world where violence, war, poverty, oppression is happening? And threat is very real. It is present. War is happening. Oppression is happening. Poverty is happening. Discrimination is happening. But with this work, I personally like to invite myself and then I like to invite others to notice, are you experiencing the direct ramifications of that threat right now?
So I want everyone to feel the words right now. It's really important. And I'll never forget there's two particular sessions. One was a demo and one I was speaking to the person or writing to the person actually. And the person in the demo lived in a house, you were there for this, with someone who was abusive. And the person was literally on the other side of the door. Like we could see the door on the screen as I was working with this person. And there was a reality that right beyond this door is someone who is abusive. And right before I came into this room, I was experiencing their abuse. And when I open this door, I'm probably going to experience it again. And is it happening right now? And that person was able to completely feel the somatic reality of right now, it's not happening. Right now, there's a door between us. And I go to that example because it's so important for people to see something that for real, that close, literally in this person's house. Something that happens every day, the expectation of it even being true, like I can expect it and usually I'm right.
Mm-hmm.
It's not about any of that. It's literally about, can your body attune to the reality that right now you're not directly experiencing it. And the reason why I teach it that way, and you now teach it that way with me, is so people can understand you deserve the moments of rest that come to you.
Mm.
If that person was sitting in the room, imagining this abusive person and feeling the projection of future abuse, their body would be riddled with so much constriction and stress that they wouldn't even be able to regulate from the abuse that happened minutes ago. And in that regulation, literally sandwiched between traumatic experiences with this person, is where resilience and agency and expression of boundaries can actually start to take root and then emerge out of you, right?
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. I know it's easy for people to sometimes hear the way we talk about it and say, oh, you're just bypassing. But I really want to reiterate the point that you said that you deserve those moments of respite. You deserve those moments of when that threat isn't happening. And I really, really want to make it clear that I encourage people to tune to those moments because, like you were saying, those moments are the moments where you are able to rest, restore, recuperate from that threat. And then, when said threat, if and when it does come back again, now you have the capacity to be with it. You have the capacity to potentially confront it or navigate it in whatever way. Like you said, maybe tapping into forms of agency and then figuring out how to potentially get out of that threat. So this isn't about ignoring the threat or bypassing it or putting on rose-colored glasses and say, no, there's no threat in the world. We can absolutely acknowledge threat is in the world. And for some of us, it may be incredibly predictable. But what may be just as predictable are the moments when that threat isn't present. So then we get curious and ask ourselves, how can I use those moments? How can I use those moments to support me, support my body, and to support me in navigating this threat?
I love that you say how they can both be equally predictable. That's a beautiful thing that I don't think we consider because when it comes to trauma and chronic stress, the predictability tends to prioritize possible danger, right?
Mhm.
So we don't also think, well, this person's going to scream and maybe hit me when I leave this room. And they're not at some point. There's actually a moment where that doesn't happen. There's a moment where I go to work, or I
Mm.
walk to the store to get groceries, or I close the door, or I'm with a friend for lunch. There's these other moments that we can't even attune to because one thing the body does when it wants to survive is it just focuses on the potential danger. Now, what's interesting about focusing on potential danger is it has a biochemical reaction. So, if you are in real time threat, you have a stimulus to the adrenal glands. So, you have more adrenaline, you have higher blood pressure, you have constriction of your veins, you have muscle constriction, you have a heightened sense of awareness and arousal because of the adrenalized state. More neurotransmission, more excitement of the brain, all these things meant to help you orient and focus and escape danger. When you're thinking of something that might happen in the future, that same biochemistry gets triggered.
Yeah.
And when you're remembering hell that has happened in the past, the same biochemistry gets triggered. It may not always be the same amount, but it's the same chemistry. And I think that's the biggest trick for people who are stuck between the past and the future is it's not just like they're mentally negative or thinking about something painful. It's that they're physically, biologically experiencing it as if it is in the room. So it tricks you into thinking you're not safe because biochemically you're not feeling safety. But
Mhm.
how have you noticed that with people?
Yeah, it's what comes to mind is sort of this analogy of when I notice when people can't attune to moments of safety, it's like their bodies are constantly running a marathon. They're going, 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 going. And that is exhausting. And so these individuals are then experiencing like moments of burnout, or they can't understand like why am I so tired all the time, or why am I so exhausted? But their body is running this marathon, even though they may not physically be running. Their body is constantly in this state of hypervigilance and propelling forward and just going. um that eventually it can get to a point of burnout, or it can get to a point of exhaustion and depletion because they don't have anything else to give.
And that's what's important. What's interesting about this with me, and is why I see it as such a trick in this human experience, this biochemistry tricks us, is there I am in my bed, being supported by a bed, being in a literal safe space, like no threat is happening. Yet my physiology isn't even able to repair because of the
Hmm.
history and the future that's kind of meeting my body biochemically or biologically or somatically. So I can't even experience rest or support or goodness when it's there for me. Even if it's 2 minutes, that's a lot. That's a lot
Yeah.
more than nothing. So I find it interesting when people experience anxiety or chronic stress or chronic fatigue or depression or fear, all these things, grief. The somatic experience of these things are just like you said, like running a marathon, because this adrenal response that happens with threat is meant to be temporary. You have this
Mhm.
huge rush, of energy in the body to propel you out of harm's way. And then the body regulates. It realizes, I escaped the tiger. Here I am in a beautiful field. I can take a breath. So the body attunes to the now. But what we're talking about when you're oriented, keyword oriented and attuned to the past and the future, you can't orient and attune to where you are now. And it's interesting. We both say this to people. If you're able to think about the past and the future, you're not currently experiencing threat.
Hmm.
Can we like play with that a bit?
Absolutely. Yeah. What I often hear people talk about is like, I ruminate on things. If you have the space to ruminate, you are in fact space because it's safe, because that's what happens when we have space. The space becomes too much. I don't know what to do with this calm. So then I have to have these thoughts that keep me in that hypervigilant state. So for me, in my practice, sometimes I'll invite people to notice, like when you notice yourself starting to ruminate, take that as a signal that either you are in fact safe, or maybe you just experienced something that was kind of pleasant. And your body's like, oh no, that feels weird. But yeah, that's what comes up for me.
So it takes me to a memory, 2019 or 2018, I believe. I was at this retreat and we were doing toning with our voices. There was 60 of us, and it was called Voices Spiritual Practice. It was led by a teacher named Meredith Monk, who's also a singer and performer that I adore. And I went there and we were doing this practice. And for whatever reason, this toning, which can create a lot of energy in the body, it set off this man's epilepsy, whose epilepsy was dormant for 30 years. And this was his first epileptic seizure he had in 30 years. He was an elderly man. And I remember his hand going up to the sky, and it pointed to the sky. And suddenly he started shaking and making, there's this really particular noise people make when they're going into seizures. And I remember time got really slow, which you hear a lot in moments of crisis or potential threat,
Mhm.
or something, emergency. Time got really slow and my body just moved toward him. And it was the same thing I had when I walked over hot coals. There was this complete bliss. Even though this, intense thing was happening, he was about to fall and hit his head. I was walking over to him to catch him before he fell. But that whole moment of seeing him and walking, I had no moment to ruminate, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, yeah.
There was no thoughts. There was like this pureness that just moved me to him without any thinking. Hey, my friends. I created a space that is affordable, accessible, and anyone is allowed to join anytime, and it's called the Library Membership. The Library Membership is an online private platform that hosts dozens of my webinars, my somatic practices, private mini lectures, and movement practices. There's also a monthly sound healing, and you'll be invited to a weekly Tuesday live mini practice with me and other participants. You'll also be invited to be a live audience member in our monthly HLN team podcast recordings, where you'll take place in the Q&A that happens off air after the episode is filmed. For more information on this membership, click on the link below, or go to holisticlifenavigation.com and click on membership and then library. You can join right now, and you can cancel or pause your subscription at any time. I look forward to seeing you in there. And I wonder if I can volley with you on that.
Mhm.
When you were with Khadijah and the doctors were trying to resuscitate her, did you notice a similar thing once you started orienting back? Like what happened in that moment for you?
Yeah, that whole experience was really interesting. So in the 30 minutes while she was being resuscitated, there was no, at least from my recollection, like no like cognitive intellectual thought, just wording. I remember the beating in my chest and just sort of I had to put myself into freeze. There was nothing for me to do to help her. And so I was just sitting there watching, and I could just feel the adrenaline in my body and my heart pumping, and I could feel my breath getting really, really, really fast. And that's when I could feel like, oh, I may go into a state of collapse or faint. And so I pendulate back to me and just kind of, and again, no thoughts, no like, calm down, you got to be here. It was just, I'm in the chair, I'm here. And then it was going back to her as I had capacity. But what was interesting was in the days that followed when after she was resuscitated, now granted, she was still on a heart bypass machine and on a ventilator. That's when I had space for rumination, the what ifs, or the what should I have done, or the what if this happens, or what if that happens. That's when I had the space when she actually wasn't in the midst of a cardiac arrest to go into that rumination.
I want everyone to consider that for themselves right now. If you think of a moment there was crisis or threat or near death experience, did you have the ability to ruminate, or was it only after? And I think that's a really helpful cue for people who are ruminating to start noticing, oh, rumination is a signal of my safety. What an interesting thing to consider.
Mm-hmm.
Rather than rumination is proof something bad's going to happen because the felt sense it brings up, rumination actually tells me I'm safe. you go to therapy, and sometimes we ruminate with our therapist about the past because it's over. So we're actually able to consider it and talk about it and cycle it. And I learned this halfway through private practice because I discovered somatics, luckily, early on. And I remember being in sessions with people, and for years, the session was about the same horrific childhood
Yeah.
experience. These were 50, 60, 70-year-olds I was working with. So decades had passed. They never experienced anything like this again, but the rumination of it kept it alive. And as I switched to somatics and pretty purely somatics, experiencing with my clients, I would start to notice there were some that had the capacity and desire to feel the now. And they would realize, I'm in your office. I'm looking at you. I'm holding a pillow. And they recovered so quickly from their PTSD symptoms, and the way they saw life recovered so quickly because in that simple 15 minutes or so of
Hmm.
feeling where they were, it started retraining the nervous system to actually feel the present moment instead of feel the past or potential future.
Yeah.
The ones that judged that, the ones that said, this is not therapy. I'm not here to feel things. I'm here to tell you what I've gone through and what I'm afraid of. Well, first of all, they left because I wasn't able to do that anymore because it just didn't feel right. But I learned, just like you were saying a bit ago, those were the people whose bodies didn't have capacity to soften. Because when
Mhm.
I'm remembering past trauma, I'm constricted. And a lifetime of constriction is overcoupled with safety. We think we are actually protecting ourselves from danger. So if I feel the room I'm in and my animal body realizes there's no threat here and I start to soften, I actually have to build capacity to soften rather than what I think, right? Like build capacity for fear and stress. I'm already good. I got that down. It's the softening we don't tend to focus on. So
Mhm.
I'm saying that for people listening because how do you teach? I mean, I know how you teach. How do you work with, we teach together. How do you work one on one with people who have this defense mechanism against softening and go into rumination when you're sitting with them?
Mhm. Yeah. So I always like to go back to agency, and frankly, I point out exactly what you just shared. That what I'm noticing in the body is a low capacity to be with the present, and that expansion, settling, ease, or calm is really, really scary to the body right now. And they usually go like, "Fuck yeah, it is." And so we kind of just agree that that's a reality. And just like how when we come into this work, people want to be with the quote unquote bad sensations, sensations of anxiety or panic or constriction or pain, we titrate into that. So I invite people to titrate into calm. I invite people to titrate into to ease. So I might ask them, is there any part of you right now that can notice that you aren't 5 years old or that your dad isn't here? And they might say, well, what? I mean, I know my dad isn't here. Okay. Well, really, let's just take a moment. Is there any part of you, as you look around the room, you notice that your dad isn't here? Is there any part of you that softens or expands? Or what do you notice? And they might say, my big toe kind of wiggles. Okay, let's notice the big toe. And so we just sit there for a moment, literally maybe 2 breaths. And then we come out of it. We can go to the part of the body that constricts around that part, the part of the body. Yeah, he's not here, but okay, now let's go with that. So it might start off where a person's body may only have capacity for calm or joy in their big toe or in the tip of their nose, or they may only be able to hold it for 15 seconds. But that's where we start. And then gradually over time, we can expand it.
You're literally supporting people to dip their toe into the lake of
Yeah.
safety. Literally, yeah. It's funny because like when I would be in my sessions with people before I started teaching publicly, I would say, let's just dip our toe into the lake of safety.
Mhm.
Let's not jump in, just let's dip our toe. And sometimes it is literally the toe. I often find it can be the ear because the ear doesn't have
Yes.
a muscle of constriction.
Hmm.
It can constrict. So it's actually one place that's never going to be constricted. The
Yeah.
earlobe, I should say. The jaw hinge is different, but the earlobe, you can say, notice your earlobe. The nose is another one that
Mhm.
often the tip of it can constrict. So there's these amazing parts of the body that literally can't protect themselves with constriction. And you can always call those in, especially those listening who are therapists or coaches, you can call attention to those. And the client can start noticing, oh, that feels okay. My toe feels okay. And then we're scanning for people's ability to hold that.
Mhm.
Is the moment, the moment rumination comes back in, that's the signal they hit capacity. And I think it's what I want people to really hear. Brene Brown calls it dress rehearsing tragedy. When something's going fine, like I think her example is, I'm looking at my beautiful child in the bed, in the crib, sleeping
Yeah.
peacefully. And then I start imagining their death.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah.
and all the peace I just had left the room. It's like, we can handle softness is actually what we're talking about here.
Hmm.
And so I'm saying that because for people listening, when the ruminations come on, it's your signal that you hit your edge for tolerating peace and
Yes.
safety, right?
Yes.
How have you personally shifted your life from this understanding of past and future showing up somatically and then orienting to the now?
Um, Folks who have been listeners know that my first birth was a really, really incredible experience, and I learned a lot from it. And in being with the waves of contractions, it just showed me the power of being present. That is, coming into having a natural birth out of the hospital, my concern was like, I'm going to tap out. I won't be able to take this, and people told me, yeah, you're going to tap out. You're not going to be able to take this. And there was one midwife I was speaking with, and she said, all you have to do is notice when you're not having a contraction. And whenever that, and her second thing was just let your jaw hang. She was like, if your jaw's relaxed, the rest of your body's relaxed. So those are the two things I had to do. One, just let my jaw relax. And two, notice when I'm not having a contraction.
Mm.
Because what can happen is that you're having a contraction, it's painful, and it may be painful because you're even constricting around it. Then there's no contraction, but you're spending the time when there's not a contraction worrying about the next contraction happening.
Yes, yes.
And
Contracting
and so
against the potential
yeah, so
contraction.
then you're contracting against the potential contraction, and then the contraction comes on top of the other. So then you're just in
Yep.
this perpetual state of contracting instead of riding the waves, the lulls of when the contraction isn't present. And so that was just a microcosm of like, oh, this is how I want to live my life. I want to know when. This is not to ignore the fact that contractions or threats will come, but can I be with and savor and restore in the moments when they're not present? So it absolutely has impacted my life. And one way I oftentimes share with people is how I choose to navigate the realities of racism and marginalization and discrimination in general. So yes, I'm a Black woman, and I live in a predominantly like white neighborhood. So statistically speaking, there is the possibility that at some point, if I'm walking in my neighborhood, a police officer or a neighbor I don't know could ask me, what am I doing here? That is real. And because of that reality, I consciously choose to carry my ID with me. And I've even gone through what I might say should anyone approach me, ask me what I'm doing here. And when I'm walking through the neighborhood, I'm also not looking at every person I pass wondering, are they going to ask me why I'm here? Are they going to ask me why I'm here? Or if a police officer goes by, I don't stop and say, oh no, they're going to stop and ask me why I'm here. What I'm attuning to is the fact in that very moment, I'm not experiencing the realities of racism. In that moment, I'm noticing how incredibly blue the sky is. Or I'm starting to notice just that pre-fall crisp in the air. Or if I'm carrying Khadijah on my chest, I might feel her squirming. So I'm taking a breath into all those things. And it's giving me space. It's giving me time to repair and just be. So that should someone approach me, I have the capacity to respond in a way that for me feels embodied, or I think will feel embodied and will allow me to access my agency. And I won't be so tired from being afraid that it might happen all the time.
I even think in that example, what I think so powerful is that particular example, let's say with a police or authority of some kind, your response coming from a place where you're already embodied in a way increases your potential safety because you're not coming from a defensive place and then triggering someone
Right.
that's already biased toward you or overly constricted.
Exactly.
That's a powerful tool in that example. That's always one of my favorite examples of yours because it's really a perfect portrait of there's reality and then there's my reality.
Mhm.
And it's like we want to be in relationship with both, but when we're oriented to reality and not oriented to our reality, we're not even in real time. So as you walk down the street, you're feeling like a moving target, when in reality, you're not yet. When the moment comes, your body will do its thing. But when it's already coming from a open, soft, embodied place, it will do its thing, like you said, in a different way, probably with much less urgency, and you won't dissociate as quickly. You'll be more conscious. And I think that's something for people to understand. And another reason I like that example is it moves it out of the idea of I can only do this in a sit down practice, and it moves it into
Yes.
lifestyle. Like
Oh
you're
yeah,
walking
totally.
and you're noticing all these things about your reality. So I want to kind of take this to the listener for a moment. Everyone listening, try it with us right now. Maybe you and I can like volley back and forth, Camille, with some
Mhm.
cues. But start by noticing just the first thing, notice the temperature on your skin and see what that feels like.
Then take a moment and notice the colors around you. Just letting your gaze scan wherever you may be, noticing the various shades that are around you.
And then notice the sounds. Notice the sounds in the room. Notice the sounds just outside the room, maybe way in the distance, and see how your body feels the sounds around you.
Then notice what might you smell or even taste in the air? What is there a hint of?
Why don't we share our own based on those prompts? Because right now I'm feeling like the temperature is perfect. It's sweating weather. You know how much I love sweating weather. So it's like temperature is perfect for me. I'm seeing all these shades of greens in the forest canopy. I'm hearing like insects right outside the window, and then in the distance I hear like a lawnmower or something. And then, I can smell someone cooking something in their kitchen and sound it's like so my shoulders are settling. I feel my spine against my chair more. I'm even losing words. I'm feeling like I'm so here. I don't even want to talk about being here.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? What are you noticing?
Yeah. So, yeah, the temperature on my skin is perfect because it's not sweating. It's 74 degrees because that's why I put the AC on. And oh, the colors, in particular, the metallics around my room are really calling my attention. So I'm noticing different metals, golds and silvers around my space. And I can hear Khadijah right outside my office. She's with my friend who's sitting with her. And I can hear both of them giggling with each other. And I can smell and taste. I have a lemon scented candle burning. So I can really just take in the citrus. And it's like a tickling. I can smell it, and there's also like a tickling in my nose. Yeah.
Mm. And hear what it's like, all of you listening, as you attune to us, attuning to where we are. It's also, we don't get that every day when you're listening to the news or a podcast or social media. You rarely hear someone, reporting the peace they're getting from their current experience. And so I always like to say, don't believe a word we say. Try this yourself. And just take a minute while you're walking or sitting or lying or driving, just to notice what parts of me can feel my current experience and compare the sensations of that to the sensation of rumination, of remembering something painful or of expecting something painful. Not to discredit historical pain, not to discredit the potential future trauma or stress, but to also not discredit where you are right now, just to feel it and see what that feeling shows you. Anything you want to add before we close, Camille?
I'll just say, I know self-care takes so many forms, but if I had to boil down self-care into anything, it would be allowing yourself the luxury of being with your present moment.
Mm, yeah. On that note, we will close. And in the episode details, you can go to the website and you can even contact Camille for one on one sessions. She barely has any more openings, but you can definitely reach out. And maybe we'll see you in one of our spaces that we co teach. Thank you all for listening. That's the end of today's episode. Now let's take a moment to notice where we feel the episode in our bodies. Close your eyes Take a breath. And let whatever wants to come up, come up. And remember, those sensations hold the wisdom that we're looking for. If you want to go deeper, visit holisticlifenavigation.com.